I used to work the night shift as a security guard. It wasn't anything glamorous. In fact, it was the kind of job most people would never even think twice about, walking empty halls, checking locked doors, and staring at monitors for hours at a time. But it paid decently, and I didn't mind the quiet. At least, not at first. The hospital I worked in wasn't exactly small, but it wasn't the busiest either. It was one of those mid-sized medical centers you find in smaller cities, big enough to have multiple floors, a couple of wings, an emergency room, and even a psychiatric ward, but small enough that at night, it could feel completely deserted. My shift was from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The staff during those hours was minimal, a couple of nurses, a doctor or two on call, and usually only a handful of patients scattered across the floors. Most of the time, I barely saw anyone. That's part of what made my job so unnerving. The hospital, for the most part, was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear every flicker of the fluorescent lights above you, or the distant hum of some old air vent rattling. The kind of quiet where your footsteps echo like they don't belong to you. At first, I chalked the unease up to working nights. Everyone feels on edge when they're alone in a big building at night, right? But as the weeks went by, things started happening that I still can't explain. Things that make me believe that maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. The first strange thing happened during my third week on the job. I was doing my usual rounds, starting on the first floor and working my way up. Most of the lights were on dim mode, which left everything bathed in this pale, almost sickly glow. As I was walking past the hallway leading to the west wing, I thought I heard something. It wasn't clear at first, it almost sounded like someone whispering. I stopped, holding my breath, trying to make out what it was. The whispering stopped. I waited another moment, then shrugged it off and continued walking. Hospitals make all kinds of weird noises, after all. Pipes knocking, vents whistling, machines humming. You get used to it. But about an hour later, when I was checking the security monitors in the control room, I noticed something. The camera feed for the West Wing hallway, the same one where I thought I heard whispering, showed a figure. It was faint, almost blurry, like the camera wasn't fully focusing. But it was there. A tall, thin shape standing near one of the patient room doors. I leaned closer, squinting at the screen. Whoever it was, they weren't moving. They were just standing there, facing the door. I grabbed the radio and called the nurse on duty. "Hey, did anyone get admitted to the West Wing tonight?" There was a pause before she answered. "No, that wing's closed off. No patients in there right now." "Why?" I stared at the monitor again. The figure was gone. "No reason," I muttered, and hung up the radio. I told myself it must have been a glitch, some static interference. Maybe the camera froze for a second and made it look like someone was there. That explanation kept me sane enough to finish the shift. But it wouldn't be the last time I saw it. Over the next month, things escalated. I'd catch glimpses of movement on the monitors. A shadow ducking into a room. A flicker of something tall and thin at the end of a hallway. Sometimes, I'd even hear footsteps when I was making my rounds. Slow, deliberate footsteps, echoing down the hall behind me. When I'd turn around, the hall would be empty. One night, I was walking past the psychiatric wing, easily the creepiest part of the hospital. During the day, it wasn't so bad, but at night, it looked like something straight out of a horror movie. The lights there were older, dimmer, and the paint on the walls was peeling. As I walked past one of the rooms, I heard a voice. It was faint, but clear enough that I froze. "Help me." I turned to look through the small glass window in the door. The room was dark. Empty. No one inside. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaking a little. No answer. I pushed the door open, shining my flashlight inside. The room was bare. Just an empty bed and a chair. The second I stepped inside, I felt it. the temperature dropped, like I'd walked into a freezer. My breath came out in a faint mist. Then I heard it again. The voice. But this time, it was right next to my ear. "Help me." I bolted out of the room and slammed the door shut. For the rest of that night, I couldn't bring myself to walk past that wing again. By this point, I was seriously considering quitting. I told myself I just needed the money, that I could deal with the job for a little longer. But then came the night that changed everything. It was around 3 a.m., the dead hour when everything always seemed the quietest. I was making my rounds on the 3rd floor, near the surgical ward. As I turned a corner, I saw someone up ahead. It was a man in a hospital gown, walking slowly down the hall. His steps were unsteady, like he was struggling to keep his balance. "Sir," I called out. "Are you lost? Do you need help?" He didn't answer. He just kept walking, heading toward one of the unused operating rooms. I quickened my pace to catch up with him. "Hey, hold on. You're not supposed to be up here without staff." But when I rounded the corner into the room he'd walked into, it was empty. No patient. No movement. Nothing. The room was completely bare. The lights flickered once and then steadied. I stood there, my skin crawling, every instinct telling me to leave. Then, behind me, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps. I spun around, my flashlight cutting through the dim hallway. No one there. But the footsteps didn't stop. They grew louder, faster, charging toward me. I ran. I didn't care if it looked unprofessional, I just ran back to the security office and locked the door behind me. When I checked the monitors later, I froze. On the camera for the surgical ward, there was the patient. The same man in the hospital gown. Only this time, he wasn't walking. He was standing directly in front of the camera, staring into it. His face was pale, gaunt, with dark, hollow eyes that looked almost black. His mouth hung open in a silent scream. I blinked, and the feed went static. When it cleared, he was gone. After that, I put in my 2 weeks' notice. I figured I could tough it out for a little while longer, but I couldn't do the night shift anymore. I asked to be moved to the days until my notice was up. The manager agreed. But on my very last night, the final night shift I ever worked, something happened that I'll never forget. It was around 4 a.m., and I was doing my final walkthrough. The halls felt different that night. Heavier somehow. Like the air itself was pressing down on me. As I walked past the psychiatric wing one last time, I heard it again. That whisper. Only this time, it wasn't one voice. It was dozens. All whispering at once, overlapping, indecipherable. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The whispers grew louder, angrier, echoing through the halls like they were surrounding me. And then, for just a second, I saw them. Figures. Dozens of them. Pale, gaunt, hospital gowns hanging loosely off their bodies. Their faces blurred, twisted, mouths opening and closing as if they were all screaming at once, but all I heard was that horrible whispering. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my light. When I blinked, they were gone. The hallway was empty again. I didn't finish my rounds. I went straight back to the office, sat there with the lights on, and counted down the minutes until the morning shift arrived. When the sun finally came up, I walked out of that hospital for the last time. I never went back. It's been years since then, but I still think about it. About the voices. About the man on the camera. About those shadowy figures. I tell myself hospitals are places of life and death. They hold so much energy, so much pain, that maybe it's natural for things to linger. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I catch myself hearing faint whispers, I wonder if something followed me home. I used to work the overnight shift at a small gas station just off the highway. It wasn't a big chain or anything, just a little rundown place with a couple of pumps, a convenience store, and one bathroom in the back. The kind of place you only stop at if you're desperate. I'd taken the job because I was short on money, and the night shift paid a little more. Most nights were boring. The occasional trucker would stop in, or a tired family heading somewhere late at night. I'd sell them snacks, fill their tanks, and then sit around waiting for the next person. But sometimes, the boredom wasn't the worst part. Sometimes, it was the people. There's something about late-night gas stations that attracts the strangest, most unsettling kinds of people. And the one I worked at was no exception. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. I had a list of things I was supposed to do: clean the bathrooms, restock shelves, sweep, take out the trash, and of course, run the register. We weren't supposed to leave the store unattended, so once I was inside for the night, that was it. The doors stayed locked, and anyone who wanted to buy something had to come in through the main entrance, which stayed unlocked but had a heavy bell that jingled every time it opened. That bell became my lifeline. The sound of it meant someone was there, breaking the silence. The store itself wasn't big. A few aisles of snacks and drinks, a fridge with sodas and beer, and a little coffee station by the counter. Behind the register was the office door, which stayed locked, and next to it was the door to the back room where the bathroom was located. The place always had this faint smell, like a mix of gasoline, cleaning chemicals, and old coffee. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and when it was dead quiet, that buzzing was all you could hear. It was during one of those slow nights when I first noticed him. The bell jingled around 2 a.m., and I looked up to see a man walking in. At first, nothing about him seemed unusual. He was tall, thin, maybe mid-40s. He wore a long dark coat even though it was summer, and his hair looked greasy, hanging in strands around his face. What stood out most, though, was his expression. He didn't look at the shelves. He didn't look at me. He just walked slowly down one of the aisles, his head slightly tilted, like he was listening to something. I watched him from behind the counter, waiting for him to grab something. But he didn't. He just walked slowly to the end of the aisle, then turned and walked down the next one. After about 5 minutes of this, he finally came up to the counter. But he didn't have anything to buy. He just stood there, staring at me. "Can I help you?" I asked. He smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. His lips stretched too wide, showing yellow teeth, but his eyes didn't change. They just stared at me, unblinking. "You work here every night?" he asked, his voice low and raspy. I hesitated. Most nights." He leaned closer. "That's good. That's very good." I forced a nervous laugh. "Well, can I get you anything? Coffee? Snacks?" He just smiled wider. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. The bell jingled, and I watched him disappear into the night. For a while, I stood there frozen, unsure what to think. Maybe he was just some weirdo passing through. But something about him unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. The next night, around the same time, 2 a.m., the bell jingled again. And it was him. Same long coat. Same greasy hair. Same unsettling smile. This time, he didn't wander the aisles. He walked straight to the counter and leaned on it. "Hello again," he said softly. Hey," I muttered, trying to sound casual. "Back for more gas?" He shook his head. "No. I just wanted to see you." My stomach dropped. "See me?" "Yes," he said. "I like watching you." I forced another laugh, but inside, every nerve in my body was screaming. "Well, that's nice of you, I guess." He tilted his head again, staring at me like I was something on display. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You shouldn't be here alone. Bad things happen at night." I didn't know how to respond. I just stood there, gripping the counter. After a long pause, he smiled again, turned, and walked out. Just like before. By the third night, I was dreading 2 a.m. I kept glancing at the clock, my stomach in knots. And sure enough, at exactly 2:03, the bell jingled. But it wasn't him. It was a trucker grabbing some snacks. I felt a wave of relief, but it didn't last long. Because about 15 minutes later, the phone behind the counter rang. I picked it up. "Hello, station name, how can I help you?" Silence. "Hello." Then, faintly, I heard breathing. Slow. Heavy. "Look outside," a raspy voice whispered. My blood ran cold. I recognized the voice immediately. I set the phone down slowly and turned toward the front windows. There he was. Standing just outside under the dim glow of the gas pumps. Staring at me. Not moving. I grabbed the phone again, but the line was dead. When I looked back, he was gone. That was the night I finally called the police. I explained everything. The man who kept coming in, the calls, the fact that he'd been standing outside staring at me. 2 officers came by. They searched the area but didn't find anyone. They told me it was probably just some drifter messing with me, and to call them again if he showed up. For a few nights after that, nothing happened. I started to think maybe they were right. Maybe he'd moved on. But I was wrong. It was about a week later when things got worse. I was restocking shelves in the back room when I heard the bell jingle. "Be right there." I called out, finishing the box I was unpacking. When I stepped back into the store, it was empty. "Hello?" I called. No answer. I walked around the aisles, checking. No one there. I was about to go back behind the counter when I noticed something. The bathroom door, the one in the back, was closed. I knew for a fact I hadn't closed it. My heart started racing. Slowly, I walked over and pressed my ear against the door. For a moment, there was silence. Then, faintly, I heard breathing. "Hello?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Someone in there?" No answer. I knocked. "Bathrooms for customers only. You need to come out." Still nothing. I reached for the knob and slowly turned it. The door creaked open. The bathroom was empty. But the light was on. And written on the mirror, in what looked like black marker, were the words, "Bad things happen at night." That was it for me. I told my boss I couldn't do nights anymore. He was annoyed, but he agreed to move me to a daytime shift. My last overnight was that Friday. I kept telling myself nothing would happen. That maybe it had all been some elaborate prank. But around 2 a.m., the phone rang. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" Breathing. Slow. Heavy. Then the voice. "I'm inside." I froze. My eyes darted around the store. From where I stood behind the counter, I could see every aisle. Empty. I slowly stepped out, my hands trembling. "Where are you?" I whispered. The voice chuckled. "Turn around." I spun. And there he was. Standing behind the counter. His smile was wider than ever, his eyes black and hollow in the fluorescent light. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. But when I looked again, he was gone. The counter was empty. The phone line was dead. I stood there, shaking, until morning. When the sun came up, I walked out of that station and never worked another night shift again. To this day, I don't know if he was real. A stalker, a ghost, a hallucination from too many sleepless nights. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night and I pass a gas station, I can't help but look twice at the man standing by the pumps, staring into the store. I used to work nights at a distribution warehouse on the edge of town. It wasn't one of those giant Amazon places, but it was still huge, high ceilings, endless rows of shelves, and forklifts constantly moving boxes around during the day. At night, though, it was a different world. My job was simple. I worked as an overnight maintenance guy. Basically, I was the one who made sure nothing broke down, and if it did, I fixed it. Conveyor belts, forklifts, lighting issues, you name it. There weren't many people around during my shift. Usually, it was just me, a couple of security guards making rounds, and sometimes a skeleton crew of workers if a big shipment was coming in. But most nights, it was just me, alone in this massive, empty building. At first, I didn't mind it. I liked the peace. I could take my time fixing things without anyone bothering me. But as the weeks went by, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. And before long, I realized the warehouse wasn't as empty as it seemed. The first weird thing happened about a month in. I was fixing a light fixture on the far side of the warehouse, one of those huge industrial lights that hang from the ceiling. The power to that section had been flickering all night, and I had to climb up on this tall lift to get to it. From up there, I had a perfect view of the floor below. That's when I saw it. A shadow. At first, I thought it was one of the security guards doing his rounds. But when I looked closer, I realized something was wrong. The shadow was moving, but there was no one casting it. It stretched across the floor between the shelves, long and distorted, like someone tall was walking. But the aisle it came from was empty. I froze, staring down at it. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, maybe from one of the forklifts parked nearby. But the forklifts were all shut off, their headlights dark. I didn't tell anyone about it. I just finished the repair and got back to work. But it wasn't the last time I saw it. A couple of nights later, I was in the break room, grabbing some coffee, when I heard it. Whispering. At first, I thought it was the radio we kept on the counter. But when I looked, the radio was off. The whispers were coming from the hallway outside. I stepped into the hall, listening. The sound was faint, like dozens of voices speaking all at once, too quiet to make out any words. I followed it down the hall, my heart pounding. The whispers led me to the main warehouse floor. The second I stepped through the door, they stopped. The warehouse was silent again. I stood there for a while, flashlight in hand, sweeping it across the endless rows of shelves. Empty. But I swear I felt something watching me from the shadows. The security guards weren't much help. Every time I asked if they'd noticed anything strange, they just shrugged it off. But one night, I went into the security office myself. The guard on duty was this older guy named Frank. He was half asleep in his chair when I walked in. "Hey," I said. "Mind if I take a look at the monitors?" He waved lazily. "Knock yourself out." I started scanning through the camera feeds. Most of them showed nothing unusual. Just rows of shelves, forklifts, empty hallways. But then I got to camera 12. It was pointed at the far corner of the warehouse, where some of the older shelves were kept. And there it was. A figure. Tall. Thin. Standing perfectly still between two shelves. I leaned closer. "Frank, do you see that?" He groaned and sat up. "See what?" "The guy on camera 12. He squinted. "I don't see anything." I looked back at the monitor. The figure was gone. I swore under my breath and flipped through the other cameras. Nothing. Frank just chuckled. "You've been working too many nights, kid. This place'll mess with your head." But I knew what I saw. A week later, I was sent to check on a jammed conveyor belt in the lower level of the warehouse. The lower level was creepy enough on its own. Hardly anyone went down there, and the lighting was terrible. I was halfway down the stairs when I noticed the door at the bottom was closed. That was strange, we never locked that door. When I reached it, I tried the handle. It was locked from the inside. I pressed my ear against it and froze. I could hear something moving on the other side. It wasn't machinery. It sounded like footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Hello. I called. The footsteps stopped. I backed away slowly, my heart racing. There was no reason anyone should have been in there. I reported it later, but when the day crew checked the room, it was empty. The door wasn't locked anymore. The night that broke me happened about 2 months into the job. It was around 3 a.m., and I was doing a routine check when the power suddenly flickered. For a moment, the entire warehouse went dark. When the lights came back on, I wasn't alone. There were figures. Dozens of them, scattered across the warehouse floor. Tall, thin shapes standing between the shelves, all facing me. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand. Then the lights flickered again. And they were closer. Another flicker. Closer still. I dropped my flashlight and ran, sprinting across the warehouse floor toward the security office. My footsteps echoed in the darkness, the lights stuttering on and off above me. Every time they flickered, the figures were closer. By the time I reached the office and slammed the door shut behind me, I could hear them. Whispers. Right outside. Frank looked at me like I was insane. "What the hell's wrong with you?" I pointed at the monitors, gasping for breath. "Look. Look at the cameras." He turned, frowning. The warehouse floor was empty. Not a single figure in sight. That was my breaking point. I quit the next morning. I didn't even finish my shift. I walked out as soon as the sun came up and never looked back. But sometimes, I still dream about it. I dream about the warehouse lights flickering, and the figures getting closer. And every time I wake up, I swear I can still hear the whispers. And those were 3 scary true night shift horror stories. Working nights is already hard enough, but it's the kind of job where you're forced to deal with silence, isolation, and sometimes people, or things, you can't explain. Which story scared you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more true horror stories. Sleep tight, if you can.